Chairman Park Sung-min had just thrown a wine glass at the sommelier's head when Maya Kim, the waitress nobody ever noticed, opened her mouth and greeted his father in a dialect that had been dead for 40 years. Every fork stopped midair. Every conversation died. The bodyguards reached for their guns, then froze, staring at this small black woman like she had just spoken the language of ghosts. The Diamond Lotus wasn't just a restaurant. It was where Manhattan's real power players came to feast, hidden behind bulletproof glass and facial recognition scanners worth more than family homes. And Maya knew her place in this world. She was invisible. Table 4 needs water, table 9 needs bread, and Maya, for God's sake, stop looking at the guests. Richard, the floor manager, hissed into her ear, gripping her shoulder hard enough to bruise. The park reservation is in 15 minutes. If you embarrass me tonight, you won't just be fired. In this town with these people, you'll never work again. Maya nodded, her tight coils pulled into a low bun, her face carefully blank. Yes, Richard, I understand. Good. Now stay in the overflow section. I have Vanessa and Kyle handling the VIP room. You're two? He waved vaguely at her brown skin and minimal makeup. You're too plain for the main event. Maya didn't argue because mice survived by staying unnoticed, and at 24 she had perfected the art of fading into backgrounds. She wore her uniform oversized, kept her head down, spoke only when spoken to. But beneath the careful invisibility, Maya carried a secret that would shatter this restaurant. She had spent her first 8 years in Seoul, raised by her Korean grandmother in the maze-like streets of Iwadong, before her Black American father found them and brought them to New York. She moved through the dining room like a shadow, refilling champagne without interrupting insider trading conversations, replacing dropped silverware before diners noticed. She was excellent at her job specifically because she had no ego to protect. Did you hear, Marcus? The sous chef whispered as Maya entered the kitchen for appetizer trays. The old man is coming tonight. Not just Chairman Park. His father, the Godfather Park Jin-woo. The kitchen went silent. Line cooks stopped chopping. Even the dishwasher paused. I thought he was in Seoul. One of the runners muttered. I thought he was dying. Men like Park Jin-woo don't die, Marcus said, wiping his forehead. They just wait for hell to need new management. Everything must be perfect tonight. If the kimchi is too sour, we're dead. If the galbi is cold, we're dead. Maya picked up the tray of appetizers, her hands steady unlike the others because she knew something they didn't. Men like Park Jin-woo didn't care about the temperature of the meat. They cared about respect, about being seen as the legends they believed themselves to be. She walked back onto the floor and felt it immediately. The atmosphere had shifted like air pressure dropping before a tornado. The regular billionaires, the hedge fund managers, and tech moguls were suddenly requesting their checks early because they knew the hierarchy of predators. When the tigers came to the watering hole, the deer cleared out. Maya cleared a table near the back, her eyes flickering toward the entrance, feeling a strange pull in her chest, a mixture of dread and magnetic nostalgia, because it had been 16 years since she'd heard the accents of her childhood. Maya, Richard snapped his fingers from across the room. Back kitchen now. Stay completely out of sight. She retreated into the shadows near the service station, clutching a water pitcher, making herself small, but she couldn't stop watching the door. At exactly 8 p.m., the heavy glass doors slid open, and they didn't just open, they seemed to yield. 4 men in dark suits entered first, moving with the synchronized precision of trained killers, scanning exits. Kitchen, guests, hands hovering near concealed weapons. Then they stepped aside and Chairman Park walked in, devastatingly handsome in a custom soul-tailored suit, tall with shoulders that filled the fabric perfectly, a face that could have graced magazine covers if not for the dangerous coldness in his dark eyes. He was the prince who had modernized the family empire, turning blood money into legitimate tech conglomerates and real estate. He looked bored, lethal, and exhausted. But the room didn't freeze for Chairman Park. It froze for the man leaning heavily on his arm. Park Jin-woo was smaller than his son, shrunken by age, but his presence was suffocating. He wore a traditional hanbok under a long black coat, his face a roadmap of scars telling stories of a soul that no longer existed, a soul of honor codes and blood debts and wars fought in shadows. He walked with a cane, but everyone knew that cane could crush a man's throat if needed. As they moved toward the private VIP room, separated by rice paper screens and velvet ropes, the entire restaurant went silent. No glasses clinked. No whispers continued. It was the silence of absolute fear. Richard bowed so low he nearly touched the floor. Chairman Park, Godfather Park, it is the greatest honor of my life to welcome you to the Diamond Lotus. Jinwoo didn't acknowledge him, just grunted and kept walking. Chairman Park offered a cold nod. The table, is it ready? Of course, sir. The best room, private, secure. Richard scrambled ahead like a servant before a king. Maya watched from the shadows, her heart pounding against her ribs. She saw the way Jinwoo walked, favoring his left leg with a specific gait, and she remembered that limp not from seeing him, but from her grandmother's stories, whispered late at night in that ancient Seoul dialect, stories about men who carried the weight of the old country in their bones. But that was only the beginning. The group sat and the bodyguards took positions at the four corners of the private room. Chairman Park sat at his father's right, and Richard snapped his fingers at Trevor, the arrogant waiter he'd assigned, who rushed forward with the wine list like he was doing them a favor. Maya felt ice form in her stomach because Trevor was good at upselling to Wall Street tourists, but he didn't know this world, didn't know you never approached until the elder removed his coat, didn't know you never offered the wine list to the son before the father, didn't know that in this culture respect flowed upward like water seeking sky. Trevor stepped up with his practiced smile. Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Trevor, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you off with some sparkling water, or perhaps a signature cocktail? Jinwoo slowly removed his coat, folded it with precise movements, set it on the empty chair beside him, then looked at Trevor with eyes that had seen men buried alive, and he didn't speak, just stared. Chairman Park sighed, rubbing his temple like his father was an embarrassment he had to manage. Just water, still, and bring me the wine list. Trevor, eager and fundamentally stupid about power dynamics, chuckled. Actually, sir, we have an incredible French Bordeaux that pairs excellently with our Wagyu. Jinwoo's voice cut through the room like a blade through silk. Do I look like I drink French wine? Trevor's smile collapsed. I'm sorry, sir, I just meant, go. Jinwoo waved his hand in dismissal, the kind of gesture reserved for stray dogs. Trevor went pale and backed away like he'd been slapped. Richard, watching from outside the screens, looked like he was having a cardiac event. He grabbed Marcus, the senior waiter. Get in there. Fix this now. Marcus buttoned his vest and approached, but the damage was done. Jinwoo was frowning, tapping his fingers on the white tablecloth in an irregular rhythm that Maya recognized because her grandmother used to tap like that when she was agitated, when the air felt wrong, when the respect wasn't right, when she felt like a relic in a world that had moved on without asking her permission. He wants the traditional banchan, Maya whispered to herself, not the fusion nonsense. He wants the clay pot and the metal chopsticks. She watched Marcus pour the water from the left side, and she actually winced because that was wrong. In traditional Korean service, you pour from the right, and she saw it coming before it happened. Jinwoo's hand shot out and gripped Marcus's wrist. The water pitcher rattled. In my father's house, Jinwoo said, his voice rising just enough to silence the neighboring rooms. You pour with the right hand. The left hand is for disrespect. Marcus stammered. I apologize deeply, sir. It's just restaurant policy to policy. Jinwoo slammed his palm on the table. The silverware jumped. The teacups rattled. I come here for dinner, not for policy. You treat me like some American tourist. You think I am nobody. Chairman Park placed a hand on his father's arm, speaking in rapid Korean. Appa juminhae. It's fine. They don't know. It is not fine. Jinwoo switched back to English, his accent thick with fury. This place has no soul. No memory. It's just glass and money. He looked ready to stand, ready to storm out, or worse, have his security dismantle the restaurant piece by piece. Richard was paralyzed by the entrance. Security was moving in. The The tension was a living thing crushing the oxygen from the room. Maya didn't think. Her body moved before her brain caught up. She grabbed a tray of the real banchan from the staff meal area, the kind they didn't serve to customers. Authentic kimchi, her grandmother's recipe that she'd taught the kitchen staff to make, the dashima broth, the sesame spinach, and she walked out of the shadows. The click of Maya's non-slip shoes on the marble floor sounded like gunshots in the silence. She could feel Richard's eyes burning into her back, could hear his career ending in real time, but she couldn't let the old man leave angry because deep in her bones she remembered her grandmother's first lesson. You never let an elder leave your home with a heavy heart. She walked past the bodyguard who stepped forward to block her. She didn't stop, just looked him in the eye and tilted her head slightly. A gesture of deference, but not submission. I have food, she said quietly in Korean. Jontong yumsik, traditional food. The guard hesitated, saw no weapon, just a small woman with a tray of banchan, stepped aside. Maya approached the table. Chairman Park looked up with narrowed eyes. He was used to women trying to get his attention, models and socialites and actresses. He had never seen a woman who looked like she wanted to disappear while standing in a spotlight. She didn't look at Chairman Park, didn't acknowledge the bodyguards. She looked only at Jean Woo, the old man still standing, chest heaving with indignation, and he looked at this young black woman who had dared interrupt his rage. Who are you? Jean Woo barked in Korean, another one with policy. Maya set the tray down, not in the center but directly in front of him. She arranged the small dishes in the traditional pattern. Kimchi at 2 o'clock, enamel at 10 o'clock. She poured the broth into the clay pot, not the modern ceramic. And then she did the unthinkable. She reached out and adjusted his water glass 3 inches to the right, aligning it perfectly with the spoon. Richard made a choking sound from outside the screens. Maya took a breath. The air felt thick like breathing underwater. She knew if she spoke English, she was just a waitress. If she spoke modern Korean, she was just another American trying to impress. She had to go deeper, back to the alleys of old Seoul, to the traditional forms her grandmother had beaten into her memory. She clasped her hands in front of her apron, lowered her chin, and spoke in the formal Seoul dialect from the 1960s, the kind used by house servants greeting Yongban nobility, Harabiaji, Jinji Hamnada, Jinji Hasten Bapul de Shipshio, Amurium Jiokjong Yul Itza Shipsio. The words hung in the air like a spell. It wasn't modern Korean, wasn't even standard formal speech. It was the archaic phrasing from old Seoul, from before the war, before the modernization, translating roughly to, honored grandfather, the meal is sincere, eat the sincere rice, and forget your worries. But the weight of it, the cultural DNA embedded in those specific words, was something that couldn't be translated. What she said next changed everything. Park Jin-woo's eyes went wide. The rage evaporated instantly, replaced by shock so profound he looked like he'd been struck by lightning. He slowly lowered himself back into his chair, his hands trembling as they gripped the table edge, his eyes never leaving Maya's face like he was trying to confirm she was real and not a hallucination sent by ancestors. Chairman Park stiffened. His entire body went alert. He looked from his father to this waitress. He had never heard anyone address his father with that specific term harabiaji in that ancient grammatical form, and certainly never heard it from a black woman in Manhattan. What did you say? Jin-woo whispered, his voice stripped of all thunder, shaking like a man who'd seen a ghost walk through a wall. Maya didn't retreat. She knew the rules now. She was inside the circle. She had crossed a threshold that couldn't be uncrossed. I said the meal is sincere, harabiaji. It is bad luck to let warm rice grow cold while anger heats the blood. And she continued in that same dialect, heavy and ancient and impossibly specific to the old neighborhoods of Seoul. Jin-woo reached out with a trembling hand, not toward the food but toward her face, stopping inches away as if testing whether she was solid matter or smoke. Where? Jin-woo choked out. Where did you learn that tongue? Nobody speaks the Uwadong house dialect anymore. They are all dead or Americanized or too ashamed of being poor. My grandmother, Maya said softly, switching to English but keeping the cadence and rhythm of the old Korean. She raised me in Iwadong until I was 8. She said it was the only way to speak to God and to men who think they are gods. The silence that followed was so complete you could hear the ventilation system humming. Chairman Park let out a short breath, somewhere between disbelief and fascination, a small smile tugging at his mouth because this woman wasn't a mouse anymore. She was a puzzle, and he had built an empire by solving puzzles. Jinwoo stared at her, analyzing her face, the shape of her eyes, her bone structure, looking for something specific, searching for ghosts in her features. Your grandmother, Jinwoo said carefully. What was her name? Maya hesitated because this was the dangerous part. This was where she could lie and stay safe or tell the truth and risk everything. But she had gone too far to turn back now. Lee Myung-hee, Maya said, the name dropping like a stone into still water. The baker's daughter from Iwadong, the one who disappeared in 1983. The name hit the table like a grenade. Jinwoo's face went absolutely white. He gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned the color of bone. Lee Myung-hee, he repeated, the name seeming to physically pain him, the one who ran away with the American soldier. She didn't run away, Maya said quietly. She was sent away, to protect her, to protect the neighborhood from what was coming. Jinwoo closed his eyes, and a single tear escaped down his weathered cheek, a sight so unexpected that the bodyguards shifted uncomfortably because the crying of a monster is a terrible thing to witness. It reveals the human underneath, and humans are always more frightening than monsters. He opened his eyes, looked at the banchan, picked up the metal chopsticks, took a piece of kimchi, chewed slowly, his eyes closing again. It tastes like home, he whispered. It tastes like before the wars, before the money, before I became this. He opened his eyes and looked at Richard, who was standing frozen by the entrance. You, Jinwoo's voice returned with force, pointing at the manager. This girl, she is not a waitress tonight. Tonight she eats with us. Richard's jaw dropped. Sir, that's against protocol. Staff cannot. Chairman Park cut in, his voice smooth and deadly as a silk rope around a throat. Richard, my father just invited a guest to dinner. Are you telling him no? No, of course not. Richard squeaked. Maya, please sit. Maya froze. I can't. My shift. I have tables. Chairman Park stood up, walked around the table with the casual confidence of a man who had never been told no in his entire life. He was taller than she expected, smelled of expensive cologne and rain, and his eyes when he looked at her held a dangerous curiosity mixed with something darker. He pulled out the chair between himself and his father. Maya, Chairman Park said, his voice low, vibrating in her chest like a bass note. Nobody refuses my father. And honestly, he looked her up and down slowly, his gaze burning. I really want to know how a 24-year-old waitress in Manhattan knows the house dialect of a neighborhood that hasn't existed since the 1980s. Please sit. Maya looked at the chair and knew it was a trap. By sitting, she was entering their world, exposing herself, marking herself. But looking at Jinwoo, who was staring at her like she was a resurrected saint, she knew refusing would be worse. She untied her apron, dropped it on the service station, smoothed her black skirt, and sat down at the table of the Korean underworld king, and what happened next would change her life forever. He didn't know the truth yet. The dinner that followed felt surreal. The entire restaurant watched in covert fascination as the invisible waitress broke rice with the Park family. Jinwoo was transformed, animated, asking her about Lee Myung-hee's recipes, about the songs from the old neighborhood, about how to properly dry radish in the winter sun. He didn't ask about Maya's life in America, only cared about the connection to a past he thought he'd lost forever. Maya answered every question, her confidence growing with each exchange. When she spoke the old dialect, she wasn't Maya the waitress. She was Lee Myung-hee's granddaughter. She had lineage. She had dignity. She had a place at this table. But Chairman Park, whose name she learned was Park Min-jun, was quiet throughout, eating slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. He wasn't interested in nostalgia. He was analyzing her, studying her like she was a coded message he needed to decrypt. So, Min-jun said during a pause in conversation, pouring plum wine into her glass, Expensive vintage older than she was. Lee Myung, he runs away in 1983. My father was what? A young gang leader back then. A soldier, Jin-woo corrected, his voice nostalgic. I was a soldier for the Jopik, running protection for the merchants. Right, Min-jun continued, swirling his wine. She runs away, but people didn't just leave Iwadong back then, especially bakers' daughters, unless they were running from something specific. She wanted a different life, Maya said carefully. She didn't want to marry the man her family chose. That's a lie, Min-jun said casually, taking a sip. But it's okay. You have beautiful eyes when you lie. Maya felt heat rise to her cheeks. I'm not lying. You are. Min-jun leaned closer, close enough that she could see the small scar above his left eyebrow. Lee Myung didn't run because of marriage. She ran because she saw something or she knew something, and someone powerful wanted her silent. Jin-woo slammed his hand on the table, making Maya jump. Min-jun, leave the girl alone. We are eating. I'm just making conversation, Appa, Min-jun said, that same shark smile appearing. I'm trying to understand why the granddaughter of a baker speaks a dialect that was used as code by the old families, why she knows the exact formal phrases we used to greet the clan elders. It's not code, Maya said, her voice shaking slightly. It's just language. It was language, Min-jun corrected. Now it's a shibboleth, a password. Only the inner families kept it alive to conduct business without outsiders understanding. My father taught it to me. His father taught him. But a baker? No. A baker wouldn't teach her granddaughter the greeting reserved for clan patriarchs unless, he paused, unless she was connected to the families in ways you're not telling us. Min-jun's gaze was surgical. Who are you really, Maya? Before Maya could answer, the air in the restaurant changed violently. The glass doors burst open. Not the respectful entrance from before, but an invasion. 6 men walked in wearing leather jackets and street clothes, too casual for the Diamond Lotus, and they were loud, too loud, speaking in harsh regional Korean. At their center was a man named Kang Dae-young, built like a boxer, known for running the port unions in New Jersey. He'd been encroaching on park territory for months, taking shipments, bribing officials, burning warehouses. The music didn't stop. It was drowned out by boots on marble. Security moved to intercept, but Kong held up a hand. Relax. I'm just here for dinner. Then he spotted the park table, and a cruel smile spread across his scarred face. He walked straight toward the VIP room, ignoring the hostess. Jin-woo didn't turn around, just kept cutting his meat, but his hand had frozen mid-motion. Park Jin-woo, Kong boomed, his voice grating. I didn't know you were back in New York, having dinner with the staff I see. He sneered at Maya. You've gotten soft, old man. Min-jun stood up slowly, buttoning his jacket. Kong, you're interrupting my father's meal. That's a terminal mistake. I just wanted to pay respects. Kong laughed, stepping into the private room, his men spreading out behind him. The park bodyguards moved forward, hands inside jackets. The restaurant became a powder keg. Kong looked at Maya. Pretty thing. Is this the chairman's new pet? Or just dessert? He reached out to touch her hair. It happened in a blur. Min-jun grabbed Kang's wrist midair. The sound of bone grinding against bone was audible. Touch her, Min-jun whispered, his voice deadly calm. And you lose the hand, then the arm, then everything. Kong grimaced, trying to pull away, but Min-jun's grip was iron. You protect the waitress now, Park. You're getting weak. She is not a waitress, Jin-woo said, standing slowly, turning to face Kong. He looked small compared to the boxer, but his eyes were black holes. She is a guest at my table, and she carries the blood of old Seoul, specifically the blood of Iwadong. Jin-woo looked at Maya, then back at Kong. And in the old neighborhood, we have a saying for men who interrupt a meal. Maya knew the saying. Her grandmother had taught her. She whispered it without thinking in the ancient dialect. Bapul bangihan saramun gomimuro juknunda. He who disturbs the rice dies of starvation. Jin-woo smiled, a terrifying cold smile. Exactly, he nodded to his security. Remove this trash from my sight. The park guards drew weapons. Kang's men hesitated. They were outgunned, and they knew it. Kong yanked his arm free, rubbing his wrist. glaring at Maya with pure hatred. This isn't over, Park, Kong spat. And you girl, you picked the wrong side. You'll regret this. The men retreated, backing out of the restaurant. The tension slowly drained, leaving diners shaking. Minjun sat back down, smoothed his suit, looked at Maya. His expression had changed. The suspicion was still there, but mixed with something else: respect, fascination, and a possessiveness that made her breath catch. You speak the old threats well too, Minjun said quietly. Who taught you that one? My father, Maya whispered. Minjun paused. I thought your grandmother raised you. She did, Maya said, after my father was killed. Who was your father? Jinwoo asked, his voice urgent now. Maya looked at her hands, then up at them both. Knowing there was no going back to invisibility, Kong had seen her, marked her. She was in this now whether she wanted it or not. My father, Maya said, her voice trembling but clear, was Li Taeyong, but you probably knew him as the Shadow. Jinwoo dropped his chopsticks. They clattered loudly. Taeyong, he gasped, my best friend, my brother, the man who betrayed me in 1991. Maya shook her head, tears filling her eyes. He didn't betray you, Harabiaji. He died protecting your secrets. He died protecting you. The silence was crushing. 20 years of blood and betrayal sitting between the teacups. Minjun looked at Maya and suddenly understood why she felt familiar. She had his father's eyes, not biologically but spiritually. She had the eyes of loyalty. If that's true, Minjun said, his voice dropping to a whisper, then you're not safe. Not here, not anywhere in this city. He stood and offered his hand. Come with us. Where? Maya asked, her heart racing. To the compound, Minjun said, because now that Kong has seen you, and now that my father knows who you are, you're the most valuable target in New York. And he paused, his eyes burning into hers. And I'm not letting anything happen to you. The drive from Manhattan to the Park Estate in the Hamptons was a blur of rain-slicked highways and suffocating silence. Maya sat in the back of the armored SUV between Minjun and the door. Jinwoo sat in front staring into darkness, lost in memories of 1991, of betrayal that might not have been betrayal, of a friend he'd had killed. The compound, as Minjun called it, wasn't a house. It was a fortress built on a cliff over the Atlantic, surrounded by stone walls topped with cameras and sensors. As the iron gates opened, Maya felt finality settle in her chest. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She was something undefined and dangerous. Welcome to your new life, Minjun murmured as the car stopped in the stone courtyard. Inside the house was a museum of minimalist luxury, all clean lines and dark wood and empty space that somehow felt more oppressive than clutter. It was beautiful but cold, lacking the warmth of the small apartment she'd grown up in, lacking the smell of her grandmother's hotioc and honey. Take her to the West Wing, Jinwoo ordered the house staff, an older woman named Sunja who looked like she'd buried bodies in the garden. Get her clothes that fit. Burn that uniform. No, Maya said, her voice quiet but it echoed in the marble entryway. Minjun stopped halfway up the stairs, turned, looked down at her. No, I keep the uniform, Maya said, clutching the black fabric. It reminds me who I am when the world isn't looking, and she hesitated. My name tag. It has my grandmother's handwriting on the back. Minjun walked back down the stairs, slow deliberate steps, stopped in front of her, towering over her small frame. The air between them crackled with electricity, fear mixed with undeniable attraction. You're stubborn, Minjun said softly, like your father. You didn't know him, Maya countered. I knew of him, Minjun corrected. He was the only man my father ever trusted completely, and the only man who broke his heart. If you're his daughter, you have dangerous blood, Maya, blood that might betray. He didn't betray anyone, she insisted, her eyes flashing. He was framed. My grandmother told me everything before she died. She gave me proof. Jinwoo spun around, his cane hitting the floor like a gavel. Proof? What proof? Maya bit her lip. She'd said too much. She gave me a key, said it opens the truth, but I never knew what it was for. I just kept it safe. Where is it? Minjun demanded, his voice sharpening. It's sewn into the lining of my winter coat, Maya whispered, back at my apartment in Queens. Minjun cursed under his breath. Queens, we have to go back tonight. Tonight is suicide, Jinwoo interjected. Kong is hunting. His men will be watching her building. We wait until dawn, we plan properly. He looked at Maya with sadness and hope mixed. Go with Sunja, rest. Tomorrow we find out if my brother was a traitor or a martyr. That night Maya lay in a bed that cost more than her entire education, silk sheets and down pillows. But she couldn't sleep. She walked to the balcony, wind whipping her loose hair. She sensed him before she saw him. Minjun was on the adjacent balcony, glass of whiskey in hand, his tie undone, looking out at the black ocean. You shouldn't be out here, he said without looking at her. Snipers. You're out here, she replied. I'm harder to kill. He turned to face her, moonlight softening the sharp angles of his face. Why did you stay hidden so long if you knew who you were? Because I wanted a life, Maya said honestly. I wanted to be Maya the waitress, not Maya the mafia princess. I saw what this life did to my grandmother. She jumped at every door knock. I didn't want that fear. And now, Minjun asked, stepping closer to the railing separating them. Now I'm in a fortress with the Prince of New York, she said, a sad smile on her lips. I guess destiny doesn't take no for an answer. Minjun stared at her. For the first time, he didn't see a liability. He saw a woman of immense courage who had walked into the lion's den with Banshan to save an old man's dignity, who had stood up to Kong without flinching. You're not a princess, Maya, Minjun said, his voice rough. You're a queen in hiding, and I'm going to help you take back your throne. Dawn came gray and cold. The convoy left at 5 a.m., 3 SUVs with heavy security. Maya rode with Minjun. He was checking a pistol, sliding the magazine with a practiced click. Do you know how to use one? He asked, holding it out. No, I know how to use kitchen knives and corkscrews, Maya said. Minjun smirked, deadly in the right hands. But today you stay behind me. If I move, you move. If I drop, you run. I don't run, Maya said quietly. They reached her building in Queens an hour later, a rundown brick building near the subway tracks. The street was too quiet. Stay in the car, Minjun ordered the driver. Team 2 cover exits. Team 1 on me. They moved up the stairwell, silent shadows. When they reached the 4th floor, Maya's heart sank. Her door was already open, wood splintered around the lock. Stay behind me, Minjun signaled, pushed the door open with his gun barrel. The apartment was destroyed, mattress slashed, drawers emptied, pictures smashed. It looked like a hurricane of rage. They were looking for it, Minjun whispered. Maya rushed to the closet, empty, her clothes scattered and shredded on the floor. My coat, she gasped, dropping to her knees. It was gray wool. It's gone. Minjun scanned the room. Kang's men beat us here. No, Maya felt tears coming. That key was all I had left of them. Suddenly the radio on Minjun's shoulder crackled. Boss, we have movement on the roof. Black vans pulling up downstairs. It's a trap, ambush, Minjun yelled, move now. Bullets shattered the window before he finished. Minjun tackled Maya, covering her body as glass rained down. The sound was deafening. Sniper fire mixed with automatic weapons from the street. Fire escape, Minjun shouted, dragging her up. Go. They scrambled out the back window onto rusted metal. Below in the alley, Kang's mercenaries poured from vans. Up, Minjun commanded. We jumped to the next building. I can't jump that, Maya screamed over gunfire. You can if you want to live. They sprinted up iron stairs. A bullet pinged inches from Maya's hand. She didn't scream, just focused on Minjun's back. He was her shield. They reached the roof. The gap to the next building was 6 feet, a terrifying drop to concrete below. I throw you, Minjun said, grabbing her waist. You catch the ledge, I follow. Minjun, look out, Maya screamed. A man emerged from the roof door, one of Kang's enforcers with a shotgun. He raised it. Minjun spun, shielding Maya. Took the blast. The impact threw him backward, but his vest absorbed most of it. He groaned, but fired 3 times. The man fell. Minjun, Maya cried, grabbing his arm. I'm fine. He gritted though his face was pale. Jump now. He grabbed her and threw her across the gap. She landed hard on gravel, rolled, scrambled up. Minjun leaped, landed heavily, favoring his left side. He was hurt. "Come on," she said, adrenaline giving her strength. She grabbed his arm and pulled him up. They ran across rooftops, sirens wailing in the distance, found a fire escape, descended into a morning market crowd, blending in. They collapsed in an alley behind a bodega, gasping. Minjun leaned against brick, slid down sitting, checked his ribs. Broken probably, but the vest saved his life. "We lost it," Minjun said, closing his eyes. "The key, the proof, it's gone." Kong wins. Maya looked at him, at the blood from a cut on his forehead. She reached out and wiped it gently with her thumb. "No," she said softly, "he doesn't win." Minjun opened his eyes. They took the coat, Maya. Maya reached down to her shoe, unlaced her work boot. The ugly non-slip shoes Richard hated, pulled the sole back. There was a slit in the rubber. She pulled out a small silver key. Minjun stared, then started laughing, a wheezing, painful sound. "You said it was in the coat." "I lied," Maya said, mischievous glint in her eyes. "My grandmother taught me never keep your diamonds in the jewelry box. Keep them in the flour jar, or in this case the shoe." Minjun looked at her with pure awe, reached up and cupped her face. His thumb traced her cheekbone. "You are incredible. You are absolutely terrifying." He pulled her down. The kiss was desperate, tasting of dust and blood and survival. It wasn't a prince and waitress. It was two soldiers in a war. When they broke apart breathless, Minjun rested his forehead against hers. "Where does the key go, Maya?" "First National Bank downtown," she said. "Box 247. Li Taeyong's insurance policy." Getting in would be easy, getting out would be war, but they had something now. They had each other. Getting into the bank was surprisingly easy. Minjun called in reinforcements. By the time they reached Wall Street, the area was swarming with park soldiers disguised as businessmen and tourists. Jinwoo had mobilized the entire organization. This was endgame. They entered the vault, air cool and smelling of old paper and secrets. The bank manager, terrified by Minjun's presence, left them alone in the private viewing room. Maya's hand trembled as she inserted the silver key into box 247. Minjun turned the second key the bank provided. The box slid out. Inside there was no money, no gold, just a leather notebook and a USB drive. "The 2000s, Minjun muttered. "Of course it's digital." They opened the notebook. Minjun scanned pages, his eyes widened. "My God, this isn't just about the 1991 betrayal. This is everything." Taeyong was tracking Kang's entire operation. "Look." He pointed to dates and transactions. "Kang wasn't just stealing from my father. He was working with the feds, selling out other families to clear his path. He framed your father because Taeyong discovered it." "My father was a hero," Maya whispered, tears streaming. "We have to show this to the council," Minjun said, his voice hard. "If the other families see this Kang is dead, his entire organization will be purged." "We can't just show them," Maya said, mind racing. "Kang is too powerful now. He'll claim it's fake. We need to make him confess." "How?" Minjun asked. "Tonight," Maya said, "the Diamond Lotus is hosting the annual council dinner. Every boss in the city will be there. Kang will be there to gloat, and I'm going to serve him his last meal." The Diamond Lotus was closed to public that night. Private event, air thick with cigar smoke and tension, heads of the 5 families present, and at the center table Kang Daeung sat like a king, drinking expensive whiskey. Jinwoo was there looking defeated, playing his part perfectly. "So Park," Kang boomed, "I hear your son had trouble in Queens this morning. Is he hiding?" "He is recovering," Jinwoo said quietly. "Pity," Kang laughed. "I was hoping to finish the job." The kitchen door opened. Maya walked out wearing her uniform, holding a covered tray. The room went silent. Kang's eyes narrowed. "The waitress, you have 9 lives, girl." Maya walked straight to Kang's table, didn't shake, didn't look down. "Dinner, Mr. Kang," she said in perfect Korean. "I didn't order," he sneered. "It's a specialty," Maya said, "compliments of Li Taeyong." She lifted the silver dome. On the plate was no food, Just the USB drive and a photo of Kong shaking hands with an FBI agent. King's face went white. Maya stepped back, raised her voice speaking in the old Seoul dialect so all the bosses understood. I Saramun Pizinjimida. This man is a traitor. She pointed at Kong. He sold you all to the FBI in 1991. He killed Lee Taeyong to hide his shame. And he's been stealing from your territories for 20 years. Kong stood, knocking his chair over. She lies. Kill her. His men reached for weapons, but suddenly the waiters around the room dropped their trays, pulled submachine guns from under aprons. Min Jun stepped from the kitchen wearing a chef's coat, shotgun in hand. Nobody moves, Min Jun roared, unless you want to die for a rat. Jin Woo stood, picked up the photo, put on his glasses, read it in silence, passed it to the head of the Choi family. The Choi boss read it, looked at Kong with disappointment, which was worse than anger. Kong, the Choi boss said, is this your signature on the FBI cooperation agreement? Kong looked around, surrounded by the 5 families, by the Parks, by the girl. It was business. Kong screamed, survival. No, Jin Woo said, walking to him. He looked at Maya. Maya, the knife. Maya picked up the steak knife from the table, handed it to Jin Woo. For Taeyong, Jin Woo whispered, but didn't strike. He handed the knife to Maya. Your blood, your justice. Maya looked at the knife, then at Kong, the man who'd made her an orphan, who'd forced her grandmother into hiding. She drove the knife into the table deep into wood, inches from Kang's hand. I am not a butcher like you, Maya said, her voice ringing with power. I am Lee Taeyong's daughter. We don't kill rats. We let the cats have them. She turned to the other bosses. He is yours. Maya turned her back on Kong, walked toward Min Jun. Chaos erupted behind her, but she didn't look back. Min Jun wrapped his arms around her, buried his face in her hair. It's over. 3 months passed, and seasons turned. Winter thawed into spring. The diamond lotus had transformed. Cold intimidation replaced with warm amber lighting. Dark curtains replaced with silk. It was no longer a place for deals and shadows. It was a place to live. Maya sat at table 1 wearing midnight blue silk instead of an oversized uniform, her hair in loose waves instead of a tight bun. She looked at her hands on white tablecloth, same hands that had kneaded dough and scrubbed floors, but now they didn't tremble. Min Jun sat across from her, the perpetual tension in his jaw gone. Shadows under his eyes vanished. He looked lighter, younger, as if armor had finally been unbuckled. You're staring at the kitchen again, Min Jun said, teasing smile on his lips. Richard isn't going to drop the tray. He's actually competent since you stopped terrifying him. I'm not terrifying, Maya laughed freely. I just have standards for Banchan service, old habits. Speaking of standards, Min Jun said, expression shifting serious. He pulled a thick leather folder from his jacket, slid it across the table. The lawyers finished auditing Taeyong's estate. Took weeks to untangle, but you need to see this. Maya hesitated. Min Jun, my father lived in Queens. His estate was old records and a rusted car. That was his cover, Maya. The mask he wore to keep you safe. Min Jun explained softly. But Lee Taeyong was Jin Woo's right hand during the Golden Age, and he was smart. He knew war was coming. He knew he might not survive. Maya opened the folder, pages dense with legal terms and numbers. Her eyes scanned until she reached the summary at the bottom. She stopped breathing. 40 million, she whispered. 42 with interest, Min Jun corrected gently. He'd been funneling his share into offshore accounts since 1985. It was never for him. The trust was named the baker's granddaughter. He saved every penny for you, Maya. Every night you served us water, you were technically the richest woman in the room. Maya stared. Tears blurred the numbers. It wasn't the money that overwhelmed her. It was the love. Her father hadn't just died for her. He'd spent his life building security she never knew existed. She closed the folder, pushed it toward Min Jun. I don't want it. Min Jun choked on wine. Excuse me, Maya, that is freedom, power. You could buy this city block. It's blood money, Min Jun. She shook her head. It came from a life that destroyed my family. I can't build happiness on that past. She looked him in the eye. Take it. Give it to families Kong extorted. build a school in my old neighborhood, build a hospital, wash the money clean by doing good. Minjun looked at her with intensity that made her heart race. He'd seen women fight for diamonds, kill for status, betray for less. Never seen someone hand back a kingdom because it felt too heavy. You really are a queen, he murmured. You'd give it all away. Not all, Maya said, small smile touching her lips. She tapped the folder. I saw a deed, small property in Napa Valley, a vineyard with old farmhouse. The ruin, Minjun raised eyebrow. It hasn't produced grapes in 15 years. It's dirt and rocks. It's soil, Maya corrected. My soil. I'll keep the vineyard. I need somewhere to bake bread where air smells like lavender and wine. That's all I want. Minjun sat back, exhaling long breath, looked around at the restaurant, the life he'd built, then back at the woman who'd saved his soul. Well, he said, reaching into his pocket again, that actually complicates my plans, or maybe perfects them. He stood, movement fluid, deliberate, walked around the table. Chatter faded as guests realized something was happening. He stopped next to her chair. I've been meeting with the council, Minjun said, voice loud enough for nearby tables, but eyes locked only on hers. I told them the war is over, and I told them the Prince of New York is retiring. Maya's hand flew to her mouth. Retiring you? But this is your life. No, Minjun said, sinking onto one knee. Restaurant went dead silent. Kitchen staff froze, peering through windows. This was my duty. You are my life. He opened a small velvet box. Inside sat a diamond, not flashy or modern, an antique Art Deco cut from the 1920s set in platinum, a ring that had survived wars just like them. I don't want to be a chairman anymore, Minjun said, voice thick with emotion. I want to be a husband. I want to wake up in Napa, watch you bake bread, fix that ruined vineyard. Maya Kim, will you let me serve you for the rest of my life? Maya looked down at the man who'd jumped off a roof for her, who'd taken a shotgun blast to shield her. She looked at the ring, then at his eyes. Dark, vulnerable, completely hers. She didn't answer in English. It felt too small. She answered in the language of their beginning, the dialect that started it all. Dang Shinu ne sumjia limnida, she whispered, voice trembling. You are my breath. Is that a yes? Minjun asked, grin breaking through anxiety. Yes, she laughed, tears spilling. Yes. Minjun slipped the ring on. It fit perfectly. He stood and pulled her into a kiss that sealed their future, not of guns and silence, but of sun, soil, and peace. The restaurant erupted. Applause thundered. Richard openly wept into a napkin. And at a corner table, Jean Wu, the old lion, watched them. He didn't clap, just broke a piece of crusty bread, dipped it in oil, raised it toward them in silent toast. The cycle of blood was broken. The feast of life had finally begun. So next time you overlook the quiet person serving your coffee or cleaning your table, remember Maya. Remember that the humblest exterior can hide the heart of a warrior and the soul of a queen. In a world of noise, sometimes the most powerful voice is the one that whispers in a language only the worthy understand. Maya didn't just find love. She found identity, justice, legacy. She proved true power isn't about demanding respect. It's about commanding it when the moment strikes. If you enjoyed this story of hidden identity, Korean underworld justice, and forbidden romance, please hit that like button. It helps the channel grow. Share this with someone who loves dramatic twists. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Comment below, what would you do if you discovered you were heir to a secret fortune? I'll see you in the next one.